Here's something that won't be very popular: CIPS, Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. And some people get me wrong about this, but I've been nigh on bullied online by people who have their professional status, their whole standing is based on, their whole career in fact is defined by the fact that they've got this professional qualification. So I can understand when someone like me comes online and starts talking about how CIPS needs to change, needs to adapt. It might really grate at their sense of self, their sense of identity, their sense of everything that they've invested their life in. Today, I'm going to tell you everything that's wrong with CIPS, why it needs to change, and why we should care in procurement about that. And first, I want to talk about the cost of CIPS and your professional qualification. So it can cost you anything between £3,000 and £10,000 to become fully MCIPS qualified. And I'm talking about exams, textbooks, the courses, all of the membership fees, and that in itself is not a small sum of money. If you think about that from a perspective of some of the countries where CIPS is developed, that's a huge investment of someone's personal money, their savings, all to become qualified. Now, I get that these things cost money, but in today's digital world where learning is so much easier, it's so much more free, it's so much more democratically provided, I just wonder how sustainable that model is. And when we talk about cost, I'm not talking about just the cost in terms of pounds and dollars. I'm talking about the cost in terms of the actual cost on people's time. So I know people, I've put many of my teams through CIPS, and they spend their weekends having to study, to cram for the exams. That's on top of all the pressures of working in a full-time job. Maybe they've got a young family, they've got other commitments, and it really is an added pressure. Now again, I get that most professional qualifications, they do require that self-sacrifice, and that should be admired. But I just wonder how equitable that is for all, because not everyone can afford that time to be spent invested in developing themselves. There are other pressures, other things that hold people back. So when we talk about equity in the professional world, how disadvantaged are some people when it comes to not being able to invest that time or that money to get that qualification? So I just feel that the qualification over competence, this is my next point. I do believe that qualifications have a place, and I'm not saying that qualifications are necessarily a bad thing. I'm degree level educated, and I know that I learnt so much in my degree which was beyond just the geography that I learned. It actually helped me in terms of being able to study, create theses, develop my critical thinking, that exposure to learning about different subjects. That's really important, and I get that. But when it comes to procurement, the professionals that have the biggest impact in an organisation, they learn on the job, they have the experience, they build relationships, they understand the commercial reality of the business that they work in. And I just think that there's too much emphasis put on qualifications over competence, and that can be a really, really bad thing, because ultimately it's the competence, it's the impact that you have within your business which will define how valuable procurement is, how you're perceived, and how good you are in your career. So the next thing I want to talk about is exam relevance. Exam relevance and rigor, because I kind of point you to this. This was a brilliant post recently put up by someone just talking about the kind of ridiculous multiple choice type questions whereby all four answers seemed to be right, and it was almost a test of how good someone was at answering exam questions versus what their real knowledge and competence was in the professional world of procurement. So I just feel that we've got to look at the way the examinations are conducted. You all know, we all know that some people are better suited at taking exams than others. I know someone who failed a CIPS exam recently, and I think it was a level 4 exam. She's absolutely brilliant. She's phenomenal at her job. She is having massive impact in procurement in her business, and yet she failed an exam. Now, does that mean that she's bad at procurement? Of course it doesn't. And I just wonder what that does to someone's confidence, their mindset, because if they feel like they failed an exam because they're not particularly good at taking exams, then does that mean that they're going to be deterred in their procurement career? I want to talk a bit about the global inconsistency. So the problem with CIPS is it outsources most of its training to approved training providers. CIPS itself means very different things in different countries. And I know people hate me for saying this, but if you mention CIPS to someone in America, they're probably like, what? What's CIPS? And yet we act like in the UK that CIPS is the be all and end all. You cannot be in procurement if you don't know what CIPS is. And I think we need to think about that really seriously, because as a professional body, do we need some global consistency and some global standards? And why does it mean so many different things in so many different areas? I think this is a really important thing to consider, and we need to take that on board. I do think that the global inconsistency is a massive factor here. So I just wonder whether we've got things right. I'm going to just pause a second because people are walking past and they're probably going to be thinking, here's that prat doing a YouTube video on procurement. So give me 1 second. And here's another thing that annoys me. The leadership by letters. So I think it's latest stats show that 58% of procurement jobs in the UK, and I don't know what this looks like globally, require MSIPs. So hang on a minute. What we're saying is we're going to exclude anyone who hasn't been able to afford that investment or that time. Maybe they've just not started their career in procurement and we're going to exclude them because they haven't got MSIPs. Maybe they've not been fortunate enough to come from a business that's been able to fund their MSIPs, and we're going to exclude them because they haven't got MSIPs. I think it's really lazy. It's recruitment standards at its very worst. It's that cookie cutter kind of template. Oh, let's look at a typical procurement role, head of leadership role. Oh, they all require MSIPs. That's going to make us look good. It makes absolutely no difference to how good you are at procurement, whether you've got MSIPs or not. And by the way, I'm not saying that someone with MSIPs can't be good or it isn't something that we should celebrate. I think that anyone who invests their time in qualifications like this deserves all the credit that they get. But what I'm saying is we should not be creating an exclusive environment for procurement. We should be looking to include people, and we should be looking to look at different industries, people coming from different professions, different backgrounds, because the future of procurement right now, it's really quite tough, and we need to be thinking about how do we reinvigorate it, how do we motivate people to come into it. And that really gets to me. The other thing that really annoys me is the training and the investment, and the fact that many procurement teams, when they do invest in training for their teams in CIPS, they then use it as kind of a noose around the necks of the people who stay there, in terms of, we'll invest in your CIPS, but you need to stay with us for the next 3 to 5 years, otherwise you'll have to pay it back. And that means that it actually does the opposite of what it should do. It stifles career progression, and that is not what we should be encouraging. Again, I guess that's not entirely CIPS's fault, but it all comes back from the model and how that works. And I think it's something we should be looking at really seriously. I don't think it should be requested in job specs. I think it can be put down as desirable, but the problem is most hiring managers, most recruiters, most HR teams, they don't understand that. They don't understand the difference between a qualification, and they don't understand how that excludes many people who can't afford to take it. I want to talk a little bit about membership fees as well, because I know that someone might correct me in the comments, but I don't believe you can still claim your qualification if you don't keep up to date with your membership. Now, that might have changed, I really hope it has, but oh my goodness, that's shocking. Just imagine being qualified for something and then having to pay for renewal of your membership to be able to put the letters against your name. I can't quite believe that that was ever the case, but it was. And that's just terrible. The membership model is so out of date. We need to be moving away from that. We should be celebrating people who've got CIPS, whether they got them 30 years ago, whether they got them 20 years ago, whether they got them currently. And we shouldn't be making it a mandatory requirement that you then have to pay to continue to renew your membership. I'm just not sure the membership model is fit for where we are today. Now, all of these things I've tried to feed back to CIPS. I'm not here trying to rubbish what I think is an organisation which wants and needs to change. My worry is that it's kind of endemic, it's systemic within the organisation. I know that Ben at the top is absolutely brilliant. He's got a fresh kind of view on the way things should be. He's a really good leader. He's really open to kind of change. But I just wonder whether they're just stuck in this trap in terms of the way that they build their revenues through getting more people through taking the examinations, through all the textbooks and all of the CIPS membership fees. That it kind of becomes addictive, doesn't it? When you've got all that revenue coming in and you need it to come in to remain I guess an organisation, then it's very difficult to flip the model. But something has to change, because let's face it, the world is changing so fast, and in the digital world, in the AI world, AI learning is going to become so important. And there's another point, AI. I just don't think that they've been at all quick to latch on to what AI is going to mean for procurement. I know at the moment they're having the great conversation, and I think that's really good, but really, shouldn't CIPS be leading that? Shouldn't CIPS have been there in 2022, 2023, telling us what we need to be doing, providing the modules? It shouldn't be 3 or 4 years later when they're kind of almost playing catch up. Again, I just don't think that there's enough fresh thinking within the organisation. This last point, here's a post that came out last year. I'm sure the same will happen this year. What happens is CIPS partner with Hayes to create a survey, which basically they use to market why you need a CIPS qualification. I know that people might see I'm being harsh here, but what happens is, just take a look at this post I created on this, but they will indicate that if you have a CIPS qualification, you'll get 40% uplift in pay. Now, any mathematician, any analyst, anyone who's in procurement who has critical thinking knows that there's a huge difference between correlation and causation. So let me explain. Correlation, and I know you know this, but correlation means that there's a correlation because of multiple factors, which means that, of course, someone who's CIPS qualified, certainly someone who's MCIPS qualified, they're going to be earning more because they're likely to have been spending more time in their career. They're going to be in a more senior position. They're going to be in a business that's been able to fund their qualification. They're going to be more senior. Therefore, their salary is going to be X. Causation means that you can attribute as a direct cause the reason why something happens. So that means that causation is you got CIPS, therefore you earn 20 grand more because the CIPS in itself meant that your business paid you 20 grand more. And the problem is that the way that CIPS as an organisation use and almost abuse the statistics to try and peer pressure people into thinking, oh, the way I need to progress, the way I need to be successful in my career is to gain an MCIPS qualification. And it's worth the £10,000 investment, because if I go through these years of training, that were years of stress, I'll be earning so much more. And that's just false marketing. And you know how much I hate false marketing. It's not the way that we should be doing things. Of course, there are benefits to CIPS. There are benefits to being MCIPS qualified. I know some brilliant people who've got MCIPS. I know some absolutely shocking procurement professionals who've got MCIPS, if I'm honest. What I'm saying is it's not the key determinant of success. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just something that we should be looking to embrace change in. I just don't think CIPS is moving fast enough to keep up to date with trends, with what the digital world is, with AI, and I just don't think it's representing us well enough as a professional body. I want it to be successful. I do think having a successful professional body with qualifications that drive consistency, standards, and a support community and all of that is really, really important, and I do think it helps really define the profession. I just don't think CIPS is represented long enough, and I believe that now we need to really be asking the question, is it CIPS? Is it something else? Does CIPS need to fundamentally change? Is it moving fast enough? And I won't be afraid to call it out, even though I know that some people will absolutely hate me for this video. So I better leave it there. See you for the next one.